Welcome to the Do You Mind podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Zimmerman, and I would like to explore the inner realms, both psychologically and the external forces environmentally, that help shape our self-confidence in today's episode. So, jumping right into it, self-confidence, the belief in one's own abilities and judgment, emerges from a complex interplay of inner and outer forces. Understanding where self-confidence comes from and how various factors shape its development involves examining both internal psychological mechanisms and external environmental influences. Here's a detailed exploration of these arguments. So first, we're going to jump into the inner forces. Number one, self-efficacy. Definition: self-efficacy, a concept introduced by psychologist Albert Bandura, refers to the belief in one's capacity to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. Here's the influence. High self-efficacy can enhance self-confidence as individuals believe they can succeed in specific situations or tasks. This belief is built through personal experiences of mastery, vicarious experiences, or observing others succeed, verbal persuasion, or in other words, encouragement from others, and physiological states, or in other words, interpreting stress and anxiety as normal rather than debilitating. Number two, self-perception. Here's the definition. Self-perception theory suggests that people develop attitudes, including self-confidence, by observing their own behavior and the context in which it occurs. That's the definition of self-perception. Here's the way it influences. When individuals see themselves successfully handling challenges or making good decisions, they develop a stronger sense of confidence. Conversely, repeated failures or negative self-assessment can undermine self-confidence. So it's how we see ourselves, how we extract from experiences, how we perceive ourselves has a huge, it's pretty much the influence of all influences of our inner psychological mechanisms. Okay, number three of the inner forces that shape our self-confidence. Personality traits. Here's the definition. Traits such as optimism, resilience, and openness to experience are inherent personality characteristics that influence self-confidence. Here's how it influences. Optimistic individuals tend to have higher self-confidence because they focus on positive outcomes. Resilience helps people bounce back from setbacks, maintaining their confidence. Openness to experience promotes learning and adaptation, contributing to a positive self-view. So this plugs directly into self-perception again. You'll have a more positive self-view when you're more open to experience as, hey, I'm learning, I'm adapting, I'm getting better. There's progress here. This isn't just a one-time thing. This is a process that's happening. And that goes straight into the fourth one. Cognitive processes. Here's the definition. Cognitive processes, including the thought patterns and belief systems, shape how people interpret their experiences and capabilities. How does it influence? Positive self-talk, realistic goal setting, and constructive internal narratives foster self-confidence. Negative cognitive distortions like catastrophizing or overgeneralization can diminish self-belief. So it's these internal narratives. It's that voice in your head. We talk about the angel on our shoulder and then the devil on the other shoulder. That there's those kind of two voices that are narratives in our mind that are telling us things. There's certain stories, and we'll elect to believe, either the angel or the devil on our shoulder. One saying, hey, it's okay, keep going, you got this. The other one saying, you suck, you just give up, just stop trying. These are internal narratives. And you can consider one positive and one negative. Typically, that's, people may have more, but depending on how many perceptions and perspectives you have and you can hold, a lot of people can overgeneralize. They can catastrophize and blow things out of proportion and tell themselves lies that they start to believe. That can diminish self-belief. You can have positive self-talk and realistic goal setting where you give yourself enough grace to allow the process to unfold and realize that these setbacks are just another stepping stone towards your success, and that you fail forward to success. It's a different narrative. It's a more positive one. So those are the inner forces. There's 4 of them listed here that help shape our self-confidence. We're now going to go into the outer forces, and there are 5 listed here, and then I will talk about how both of these interact with each other. So outer forces, number 1, family and early environment. I mean, we're all familiar with this one. Here's the influence. The family environment and early childhood experiences play a critical role in shaping self-confidence. Supportive, nurturing families that provide positive reinforcement and encourage independence help build a strong foundation of self-confidence. Conversely, critical or overprotective environments can inhibit the development of self-confidence. So it explains itself there. To kind of add a little bit to it, a lot of our personal identity is shaped in the younger years because we're seeing what's available and how we're being treated and how we're being punished and rewarded, essentially. You know, some of this stuff is by ourselves, but, you know, our own feedback of what we do, you know, if I stick my hand when I'm a little kid on a hot stove and it burns my hand, that was just me involved. There was nobody else. It wasn't my family. It was, I guess you could say, my environment. So yeah, it was early environment, but it wasn't necessarily my family. But say, if I do something that my dad doesn't like, you know, it breaks the rules of the house or something like that, and I wasn't really too familiar with the rules, and he punishes me, then I'm going to have a response to that as well. Like, hey, this is kind of how the environment is, because I'm getting feedback there and I'm adapting to it, right? I'm changing my behavior based on how I am punished or rewarded in a given environment. And the first environments that we have that shape us the most heavily as our brains are still developing is the family environment, and it being early, like when we're children. So that's number 1 of the outer forces. Number 2, social support and relationships. Influence. Relationships with friends, peers, mentors, and colleagues can significantly impact self-confidence. Encouragement, positive feedback, and constructive criticism from a supportive social network reinforce self-belief. Conversely, toxic relationships, bullying, or social rejection can erode self-confidence. And this one is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, most of us have, depending on your age, I mean, we've all had relationships with friends, peers, and mentors and colleagues. So we understand their approval means something to us because we care about what they think, because we have, you know, a relationship with them. We care about them. We spend time with them, and we want to be accepted and loved. And we also want to be seen for our own unique qualities and abilities. So being recognized by our peers, friends, mentors, and colleagues can help. It significantly impacts our self-confidence. Because it's, once again, it's the feedback loop. It's us receiving information for how we're performing, and then we're plugging that into what we're capable of. So it can either, you know, it can impact it positively or negatively. Same thing like toxic relationships, being bullied or being rejected, and that plugs back into the inner psychological processes that go on, which we'll get into in a minute. But this is how one of the outer forces, social support and relationships, can affect that, coming from the outside of you. Number 3, cultural and societal norms. Here's the influence. Cultural norms and societal expectations shape self-confidence by influencing what behaviors and attributes are valued. Societies that promote individualism and self-expression may foster higher self-confidence, while those with rigid, conformist norms may suppress it. Gender roles and stereotypes also play a role, often impacting self-confidence differently across genders. This one's huge right now. It's very relevant, very apparent. We're kind of mixing and changing the definitions of what I think people get sex and gender confused, but there are gender roles like the man of the house or the woman of the house. And obviously we know, or most people are more familiar with the traditional roles because they've been around for a long time. But now you have a progressive movement, meaning, changing the stability of the traditional roles and shifting that into these different new roles that these genders have more access to, because it's being highlighted in our culture, in our society, as a thing. Like, hey, this is a possibility here. Why can't we challenge the way we're behaving and acting and the roles that we're playing, and push those to different places, different extremes, however you want to label where they're going. Because I think a lot of people have different takes on this, on if it's a good or bad thing. I don't necessarily take a side here. I think both have their place. So that is the third outer force, cultural and societal norms. It has a pretty heavy influence on how we perceive ourselves. So that's going into the interplay of these two, which we'll get into in a second. 4, educational and professional experiences, the influence. Educational achievements and professional accomplishments contribute to self-confidence. Successes in these areas provide evidence of competence, reinforcing self-belief. Supportive teachers, mentors, and supervisors who provide positive feedback and opportunities for growth can enhance self-confidence. Conversely, negative experiences such as failure or lack of recognition can undermine it. So, our teachers and mentors and supervisors, people we look up to, people that are helping us get to where they're at, typically, we definitely value what they think and care about it, and their feedback that they give to us is going to heavily influence self-confidence and our self-belief in our ability to do ultimately what we're trying to do, which is what they've already done in the most situations. Number 5 of the outer forces that shape self-confidence: media and technology. Influence. Media and technology shape self-perception and self-confidence by setting standards of success, beauty, and behavior. Positive representation and diverse role models in media can boost self-confidence, while unrealistic portrayals and negative comparisons on social media can lead to self-doubt and insecurity. And my personal note on this one, I guess. We see this a lot, specifically with women. You'll hear stuff like this about how, you're comparing yourself to the Kardashians, for instance. Your waist isn't thin enough, your butt isn't big enough, your lips aren't plump enough. That's what I've observed from a female perspective. I've heard things there. From a male perspective, it's like, you're fat and pudgy. You don't care. You have a $2 body. You can't see the definitions of all your muscles, so you must not care about your body. Therefore, you're lazy and incompetent, or you don't care enough, and therefore you're not as valuable. You're not a high value man. You haven't cultivated your your divine masculine, things like that. Comparison is the saying is comparison is the thief of joy. So when you start comparing yourself to other people, it can start to undermine your self-confidence if they're like ahead of you, do you think? Depending on which way you compare. If you compare to like somebody that has less, that's maybe living on the streets and is unkept and isn't necessarily progressing anywhere in life, then you compare to them, you think, oh, well, I'm doing pretty good. And we talk about these televised train wrecks and things like that. It's like, well, my life's actually pretty good compared to that person. But then you compare up the social ladder, people with their yachts and their successful businesses and their supermodel spouse, and they live in mansions. Typically, it's a lot of material stuff, and we think, wow, that person's able to travel and do whatever they want and make their own hours and has financial freedom. My life sucks. So, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty rampant, especially with social media, because we have more eyeballs and attention on other people's lives now. It's much easier to compare. So that one's pretty big. Pretty big. Let's talk about how they interact now. So the interaction, which we kind of have, but we're going to get more specific. Interaction of inner and outer forces. Self-confidence is not solely the result of inner or outer forces, but a dynamic interaction between the two. For example, feedback loops. Positive external feedback can enhance internal self-efficacy, which in turn can lead to more positive behaviors and further external validation, creating a reinforcing loop. Coping mechanisms. Inner resilience can help individuals better navigate and interpret external challenges, maintaining self-confidence despite adverse circumstances. Third, adaptation and growth. A supportive environment can encourage the development of inner traits like optimism and resilience, while strong internal self-belief can help individuals seek out and create positive external environments. So here's the conclusion. Self-confidence emerges from a complex and dynamic interplay between inner psychological forces and outer environmental influences. By understanding and leveraging both of these domains, people can cultivate a stronger, more resilient sense of self-confidence. So, yeah, that pretty much explains it. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance that we can get into, and I've gotten into some of it as I was describing these. But real quickly, just to go over the 4 inner forces and the 5 outer forces. So inner forces, self-efficacy, self-perception, personality traits, and cognitive processes. Outer forces, you have your family and early environment, social support and relationships, cultural and societal norms, educational and professional experiences, media and technology. So these are the 2 domains that we can leverage. And understanding this stuff, you start to realize and see the patterns. You're able to then disrupt those patterns and then change them how you see fit to build your own self-confidence, because you're choosing how to interpret your experiences and what they mean to you. And, people like to be recognized. They like to be respected. They like to be presented with opportunities. They like to be invited out to parties. They like to be celebrated for their achievements, right? That's all. A lot of that stuff's external, but it feels internal. So we're very connected with the outside world. The internal world and how we process that stuff is one of the domains as well. So we don't want to live in one or the other, but understand they're both active and at play here. And when we look at this stuff through the lens of like, hey, all experiences, ultimately I can choose that, hey, this is actually a learning experience in some way, shape, or form. I'm getting value out of this, and I'm choosing to see it that way. And I'm going to set up a narrative of like growth and adaptation. And I'm going to curate my environments to be supportive and encourage these traits like optimism and resilience. So we want to set up supportive environments. And we want to have those kind of relationships as well. So I hope this helps everyone listening understand how self-confidence is built, how it's maintained, how it can be destroyed, how all of these different things are at play, and that we do have control over this stuff. We can work on this stuff. We're not fixed. We are constantly changing. And it's just a matter of being more aware of these patterns and where they came from and how they're continuing. So we can start to understand ourselves better and how we're approaching things and also how we're receiving things. And continue to shine a light on the path that we want to be traversing. We want to be heading down a certain path and not to be in the weeds, so to speak. We want to see the forest for the trees. So, yeah. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned. I have a lot more topics that I'll be releasing on. A lot of it has to do with pretty much all personal development and understanding ourselves better. The mind, the body, relationships, emotional resilience, emotional mastery. Yeah. So stay tuned and thanks for listening.